Hello and welcome to your second lecture on Android. By completing this lecture, you will be able to understand the basics of Android, understand the architecture of Android. You'll be also able to understand activities, layouts, XML standard and the manifest file of Android. You'll be able to create your first Android project. You'll be able to create your first Android virtual device, which is an Android emulator. And you'll be able to create a functional Android application by the end of this lecture. So let's start with that. We'll first understand the concept of Android. Android is built on an open source framework that indicates that the framework of Android which you have is open source. That means all the libraries, all the codes are open source to you. You can download those codes, modify those codes, and then upload those codes online so that the community gets bigger and bigger. The source codes of Android can be downloaded from a website called as github.com. Android has opened mobile phone development to thousands of developers. Prior to Android, there were some operating systems for cell phones like iPhone, which is still in existence. You had BlackBerry, you had J2ME, that was Symbian. Now, the major problem with all these platforms was that if you want to develop for iPhone, you had to have a Mac OS with you, and a Mac OS comes on a MacBook. That MacBook's cost is very high. If you want to develop for the real application on iPhone, you have to have a real iPhone at your hand, and that iPhone is too costly. So iPhone development is a costly affair. When people went towards Symbian development or J2ME development, that development did not give them all the features on the device, so they discarded that. BlackBerry and Windows platforms were not that hype. That is why people did not prefer to develop for those platforms as well. That is why those platforms did not come into picture so widely. But Android as a cell phone device has opened the development to thousands of developers because Android is built on an open source framework, as well as the development of Android is not that difficult as compared to J2ME or BlackBerry. Android markets provides you a no review process to distribute free and paid applications. The meaning of this is whatever application you will develop, no one is going to review it. You can directly put that application on the market. Now, a question might come to your mind, then who will review these applications? The reviewers of the applications are the users of the applications. The persons who will use those applications will review the applications and give stars on their applications ranging from 1 star to 5 star. Depending upon the number of stars your application gets, the rating of your application improves on the Google Play Store. Okay, the Google Play Store is a Android market where you can download all the applications of Android. You can develop and distribute free and paid applications without any review process. So that's a very big deal that you should consider. Android is purely based on the Java programming language syntax and possesses all Java-based capabilities. So whatever Java programming you have learned before, you can apply that knowledge to Android to create rich applications on Android. It is built on the Linux kernel, thus it's very secure. Whatever activity you want to perform on the device, you have to take a permission from the user to do that. That makes Android very secure. Android uses Dalvik Virtual Machine (DVM), which is a lightweight version of the Java Virtual Machine. Okay, whenever you will develop applications for Java, you require a JVM, that is Java Virtual Machine, whereas for Android you require DVM, that is Dalvik Virtual Machine. Let's see what's more. Whenever a device has to be an Android compatible device, Android has given some specifications for that. These specifications are that the device must have a built-in accelerometer. The meaning of an accelerometer is that whenever you will keep the device horizontal, the photograph will turn, or the complete layout of the device will turn. When you keep it vertical, the layout of the device will again turn. This is with the help of accelerometer. Then you should have a camera, you should have a GPS, GSM support, touchscreen support, and a powerful processor on its core. Let me tell you a small example of this. We have recently launched Samsung Galaxy S3. That Samsung Galaxy S3 has a quad core processor wherein each core is running at a speed of more than 1 gigahertz. So you can understand the power on the core processor and much more. Now this is very important. Any device which does not adhere to all these features is not an Android compatible device. That indicates that if a device is not having all these features, then that device will not be able to access the Android market, or that device will be a not compatible Android device. Okay. Let's understand the application framework of Android. The application framework of Android is divided into four parts, as we can see over here. The first part is the Linux kernel. At the base, we have the Linux kernel. The Linux kernel gives the hardcore access to all the device hardware components via some libraries. Okay, so if you want to access hardware drivers, you have to go to the Linux kernel. If you want to access power management, process management, or memory management, then you have to have the permission from the Linux kernel. Built on this Linux kernel, you have all the libraries like the graphics library, media library, the SQLite database, etc. All these things are built on top of the Linux kernel. So if I want to access the graphics library will use hardware, will use power, will use process, and will use memory. So whatever the libraries will do that process with the help of the Linux kernel. On top of the libraries, we have the application framework. The application framework is a set of classes that is used to develop applications in a much better way. So the application framework uses the libraries. The libraries use the Linux kernel to access all the hardware components. On top of the application framework, you have the application layer. The application layer contains three parts. First part is the native applications. These applications are by default built on the device, like the contact book, the messaging application, the dialing application. All these applications are native to the device, so they are called as native applications. The second type of application is called as third-party applications, means the applications which you will be building and putting on the market will be called as third-party applications, and the applications which you will be developing will be developer applications. So the application layer will use the application framework. The application framework will use the libraries, and the libraries will use the Linux kernel. That is the Android application framework, or the application flow for any application on Android. First of all, whenever you want to start developing for Android, you have to set up the Android development tools. So whenever you want to develop professionally, you have to do it with the help of an IDE, or an integrated development environment. Eclipse is a very powerful IDE and is used for development of many technologies, as we have seen that we can develop for Java using Eclipse. Eclipse supports Android with the following two components. The first component is called as Android SDK. So you will be requiring Eclipse, you'll be requiring Java, and you will be requiring something called as Android SDK. This indicates this is the Android's software development kit. The Android software development kit is a set of libraries which you can use for developing applications for Android. And then you require something called as Eclipse Android plugin. Now a plugin is an extension to the Eclipse IDE. A plugin will incorporate all the features of the Android SDK inside Eclipse and will provide you a GUI to do everything that you want to do for Android using Eclipse. We'll come to this later in much more detail. Remember that always develop for Android using Eclipse. Okay, Eclipse is a de facto standard that is used to develop for Android applications these days. Now here are some important links that you can pause and note down. The first link is eclipse.org/downloads. From here you will be able to download Eclipse. From this link you will be able to download the Android SDK, and this link will tell you how to install the Android SDK on the Eclipse via the Eclipse plugin for Android. Okay, you can copy these three links in your copies, but make sure that all these softwares are included in the DVD which is given to you. Okay, let's start with the first application on Android. Before starting our application, we need to have two folders in our computers. The first folder is the Eclipse folder, and the second folder is the Android SDK Windows folder. Both these folders are given to you on your DVDs. You can just copy these folders to your C drives and we are good to go. Then you must start Eclipse by going to C drive/eclipse/eclipse.exe. Then when you are inside Eclipse, you must go to Window and select Preferences and select Android from the left pane of these preferences. We'll be doing this thing in the Let's Do It section, but for now just understand that we have to select Window, Preferences. Inside Preferences we have to select Android from the left pane, and on the right hand side you will be getting a path. You have to click on that path Browse button and select C drive/Android SDK Windows. As you click on Apply, the Android SDK will be loaded from that path inside Eclipse. Okay, now first of all, let me reiterate what you have to do. You have to copy both the folders Eclipse and Android SDK Windows to your C drive. You have to start Eclipse from the C drive/eclipse/eclipse.exe file. Once you are inside Eclipse, you have to go to Window, say Preferences. In the preferences, select Android from the left hand pane, and then in the right hand side you will be getting a path. Click on Browse and select C drive/Android SDK Windows. As you click on Apply, it will load the SDK from that path. Okay, so now you have your complete setup ready. With this setup, you will be able to now start developing applications for Android. Let's create a new project with Android. To create a new project, you must go to File and say New Android Application Project. Once you do this, you'll be getting a big form. You have to fill that form up. The first field inside this form is the application name. This is the name of the application of Android. We are giving the application name as Hello Android. We have to give the project name as well. So let's give the project name same as the application name. And we have to give the package name. The package name is a very important part of a project. The package name should always start with the reverse of your company's website name. So if my company's website is fitech.com, I'll be giving the reverse of that as com.fitech. So if your company's name is Microsoft, you should give com.microsoft. And your application name, that is Hello Android. Then you have to deselect this create custom launcher icon, and you have to select the version of Android for which you will be building. We'll be building it with Android 2.3.1, so let's choose it Android 2.3.1 and click on Next. Okay, so we have to give the application name, the project name, the package name. The package name should be the reverse of the company's name. We have to untick this create custom launcher icon. We have to give the build SDK, that is Android 2.3.1, and click on Next. As we click on Next, we have to select a blank activity. What is this activity we'll see, but for now just select the blank activity and say Next. Then we have to give an activity name. This will be done by default for you, so you can just keep it as it is. The activity name is main activity, and you have to give the title of your application. this title will be the name of the application that will appear in the device menu. So just give this name as the name that you want to appear on the device menu. I'm giving the name to be Hello Android, and I'll be clicking on Finish. So this creates the Android application for us. Now, to run this application, we'll be requiring an Android virtual device or a device where we can actually run the application. So, running the application is done on an Android virtual device. The Android virtual device or the emulator is an exact replica of the real Android device with most of the features. Why most of the features? Because the Android virtual device will run on your PCs. The PC can perform most of the operations of a cell phone but not all the operations. For example, a cell phone can vibrate but a PC cannot vibrate. A cell phone can have call facility from one cell to the other cell, but the PC will not have a call facility. So these are some of the features which the device does not possess. That's why we say the emulator is what? It's an exact replica of the real Android device with most of the features, not all of the features, but most of the features. Eclipse provides us a way to create an Android emulator by using a nice graphical user interface. Let's see. Whenever you want to invoke the GUI to create the AVD, there is something called as Android SDK and AVD Manager, as shown over here. As you can see, this is that button. Just click on this button. It will start the AVD Manager, the full form of AVD being Android Virtual Device Manager. So when you click on that AVD Manager, such a screen will appear. You click on New. Clicking on New will give you a screen. Click on the name and give the name as Android. This is the name of the emulator or the Android virtual device. I am giving the name as Android. You can give any name, and you have to select the target. As our course is on Android 2.3.1, so I'll choose the target to be Android 2.3.1, and we'll say create AVD. As we'll say create AVD, a new AVD will be launched over here. But this has just created the AVD for us, but we have not yet started the AVD. So just click on the AVD and click on start. This will start the AVD, but before starting, we have to make sure that the screen size that we have kept for the AVD is same as the screen size of our computer. So you have to select scale display to real size. That means you have to check this option, and then you have to say screen size is 6 inches. As you will say screen size of 6 inches and click on launch, a device will be launched in front of you. This is an exact replica of the actual Android device. You can click on various parts of this device so as to get a feel of the Android operating system. Now, how to run the application of Android on a device? Just right click on the application and say run as Android application. This will actually run the application on the device. If you watch the console very closely, you will be able to see that your application is now being launched on the device. With this, let's do this complete steps, and then we'll be able to have a brief idea of what is happening behind the scenes.
So let's do it for a first Android application. As we saw in the slides, we have to first set up the Android development tools on our Eclipse IDE. To do that, we have to go to Window, say Preferences, Android. Over here, you have to click on Browse and select the path of the Android SDK Windows folder on your desktop. Once you do that and you press OK, this is the time where Eclipse will load all the tools of Android from that folder into the Eclipse IDE. This is a very crucial step. That's why I'm repeating it again. You have to go to Window, say Preferences, Android, click on Browse, select the path of the Android SDK Windows folder on your C drive, D drive or E drive, wherever you have copied it, and press OK. This will set up the Android SDK tools with Eclipse on your Eclipse IDE. Now let's start with the first project on Android. You have to go to File and say New, Android Application Project. Over here, let's give the application name as Hello Android. The project name comes automatically. You have to give the package name. So let's give the package name as com.fitech, because fitech is my company's name. So I'm giving it com.fitech. If your company name is ABC, you should give it com.abc and dot the application name. Give the build SDK as Android 2.3.1, because this course is built on Android 2.3.1. You have to deselect the create custom launcher icon, because we will not be creating a custom icon for our launcher application. We can deselect this, then press next, next, and give the title of the application to Hello Android. Now this is the title of the application, meaning this name will be used wherever your application will be installed on the device. So you have to just give the name as Hello Android. I'll press finish. As you can see, we have the Hello Android project available with us. Eclipse will do some initializations on the project. I'll just close this layout for now. First, let's understand what is the flow of the project. In the src folder inside your package name, you have all your Java codes, that is the codes which you will be creating. Inside gen, you have all the generated Java files, that is the files which will be generated automatically for your project. This is your Android 2.3.1, that is your Android build platform. You don't have to worry about dependencies, assets, bin and libs. Then you can jump down to RES. RES indicates the resources in your project. Resources can be drawables. Drawables are nothing but icons, images, etc. You will have layouts in your project. You can have menus in your project, and you can have values in your project. We'll be covering these things later on, but for now just understand that inside the RES folder you have all the resources. Then you have your Android manifest file, that is your model file of the project, and then some properties of the project. So far so good. We have created our first Android project, and until now we haven't typed a single line of code. Okay, that is the main advantage of doing programming in Eclipse, that you do not have to type more. You have to mainly concentrate on the application's logic. Let's now create a new Android virtual device. Over here, you have to click on new. I'll just do that again. You have to go to opens the Android virtual device manager, or you can go from window AVD manager. That's fine. Both places will give you the same window. I can click on new. Let me give the name of the device as Android. Let me give the target of the device as Android 2.3.1, because all the applications will be running on Android 2.3.1. Let me give the size of this as 256 megabytes and click on create AVD. As soon as I'll say create AVD, it will give me an output over here saying that your Android AVD has been created. Let me click on that and say start. Over here, it will give me an option to scale the display to real size. I will do that, because if you will not do this, the AVD will fill the entire screen of your desktop, but you don't want that. You want the AVD to be of a proper size. So let me give the size of this as 6 inches and say launch. Once you launch it, the AVD will be started and you'll be getting a screen showing you the AVD. Now this is your screen wherein you get the AVD launched. So far so good. You can close this thing safely and close this thing safely. You have to understand some things, that for n number of projects, you have to just create the AVD once, because the AVD is an Android virtual device. One device is sufficient to run all your projects that you will be building. Whenever you will be required to send SMSs, or whenever you'll be required to make calls from device to device, then you can create one more Android device. Apart from that, just one Android device is sufficient. This will load the Android device. Most of the people think that this has stuck, but this is not stuck. It is loading the Android operating system on the Android virtual device. You will be able to see this screen depending upon your computer's configuration. This is your Android's loading boot screen. As we can see, the Android device is now up and running. You can click on this option of menu. It will give you the complete applications that are loaded on the device. This is a blank device, so it comes with all the inbuilt applications like browser, calculator, contacts, email, messaging, etc. Every device will have at least 3 buttons. Every real Android device will have at least 3 buttons. The first button is the home button. Clicking on the home button will close everything or will send everything to the background and come to the home screen. Clicking on the menu button will spawn a menu. This is called as a menu in Android. And clicking on the back button will go back one step in your Android device. For example, if I come to the main launcher, I go to settings and then I go to display. If I click on back, it will go back one level, but when I click on home, it will go to the actual home screen. I hope you are getting the difference between the two. Alright, let's now right click on the project and say run as Android application. When I'll run this thing as an Android application, it will launch the application on my device. It is saying that automatic target mode emulator is found. It has started that thing. See this, we are able to run our first application on Android without even writing a single line of code. Isn't that amazing?